Welcome to LSCDS Speaks. This is a new initiative by LSCDS with the goal of enhancing professional growth for students and postdocs. My name is Maria, and I will be your host as we talk about all things professional development to help you make your next career move. In our first episode, I sit down with Dr. Reinhard Reitmeyer and Alla Alasfin. Keep listening to find out how lessons from 10,000 PhDs can help you maximize opportunities to network and grow professionally in the university environment. So I'd like to first start off by getting a faculty perspective from Dr. Reinhard Reitmeyer. Dr. Reitmeyer was a former chair of biochemistry at U of T and is a special advisor to the Dean of Graduate Studies on professional and leadership development. He has dedicated a significant proportion of his career to ensuring that graduate students have both the skill set and network to take advantage of all the diverse job opportunities in today's global marketplace. Hi, Dr. Reitmeyer. It's really great to have you here today.
Oh, hey. Hi, Maria. Also great to meet you, and I'm very honored to be the first of this really great podcast series.
Thank you. So let's get started. I thought we could start with talking about the 10,000 PhDs project that you initiated. And this was a pretty monumental project because it garnered a lot of attention from multiple universities, including the University of Toronto.
Right. But maybe I'll just start with sort of how that idea kind of came into my head. It's always good to kind of know the history. So as you mentioned, I was chair of biochemistry, and we have to write these reports for external review every 5 years. And coming up to my end of my second term, and I realized that we didn't have any outcome data for our master's or PhD graduates. So how can you evaluate a program where you don't know where your graduates are going or what they're doing? So actually I hired a recent graduate who had really good social networking skills to kind of find her colleagues and people who graduate over this roughly the decade I was chair. And she came down with some really interesting data that made it into a report. But the one thing that really stuck in my head was that of our PhD graduates, 15%, went on to become like professors like me, right? And I thought that can't be right. Like, we're a really great department and we train the next generation of scientists, scholars, etc. But it was true. And then I said, well, what about the other 85? Because we're really, the way I was trained and the way our department kind of worked was an apprenticeship model that, you do what I did and you'll be, successful as I have been, right? It's a pretty simple model. And I was very concerned about the 85. So, are they, working at Starbucks or, going to see them in an Uber, driving me to the airport to going off to a meeting? I said, weren't you a PhD student in biochem?
Oh, very sad.
Yeah. And the answer was no. They were doing amazing things. They had great, careers and jobs. And in biochemistry, of course, it would be in biotech, pharma, et cetera, but also in science communication, science writing, and government policy. I mean, the real problem, Maria, was I, as chair, didn't know about that. Most students, didn't know about that. Most supervisors, professors didn't know about that. We sort of pay attention to the people who go off and do, a fancy postdoc and become, professors, and we keep connected with that in our network. And the rest, are going off to do something else, which we have literally, often no interest in, right? Well, they went off, even called it the dark side for a while. They went to industry, the dark side, I don't know what they're doing. So, so startling.
Yeah, so I think that was one of the problems maybe earlier on where industry was considered the dark side. Now I think it's becoming more acceptable that PhDs 100%. Can go into industry.
So then I had that information. I said, that's for biochemistry. We should do that, for all departments. And then I thought, well, and so again, the School of Graduate Studies wanted to be very transparent about this. They didn't know what the outcome data would look like. It might have been not looking very good for people with graduate degrees, but it turned out to be same thing. It was really good stories. There are all kinds of great stories. So they put it on the SGS website. And again, I'll tell people, if you're interested, just go to the School of Graduate Studies and look up 10,000 PhDs, just Google that, and you'll find a dashboard with all the information. I also wanted to get it out, I just mentioned, into the wider world. So my team and I, we wrote up a paper. It's published in PLOS, 1. So just Google 10,000 PhDs, and you can Google my name, Reinhard Reitmeyer. I'm the only Reinhard Reitmeyer in the world, so I'm easy to find. Google. So you can find that paper, and it has some data in there as well. So just to finish that up a bit, so if you go back to life sciences, say at U of T, right? Again, about 15% of the PhDs become professors, similar to the data we had in biochem. It varies a little bit with graduate units. I think immunology is a little bit lower, and turned out a lot of the immunologists got jobs with like Sanofi, Pasteur, makes sense, vaccines, etc. I'm sure it's higher now, sort of in the pandemic era that they're hiring people to do Moderna. I mean, the person who created Moderna had a master's degree from U of T, right? So there you go. So you can be an entrepreneur, create a company, and become maybe rich and famous. I don't know. So there you go.
Toronto is like becoming a startup hub as well. So I think there's a lot of resources for that as well.
Yeah. And a lot of it, people will, our graduates do work at our hospital research institutes, and they are professors as well. So it's another segment there, a little bit higher than the 15%. So maybe another 10% doing that. And a lot of PhDs actually work at the University of Toronto doing things like they're in the research office or in communications, and you talk to people and say, oh, you've got a PhD in art history, right? Okay, cool. I like academia, I like the university environment, so I decided to take a job, working in, the president's office, right? Working on communications. Cool.
Culture is very important, and if you like the culture, it's a big incentive to stay.
Yeah. So I'll just make one comment, because a lot of quotations from students when I'm talking to them. A lot of times it's, they. I still love research. I just don't want to do it anymore kind of idea. I still love it. So maybe they'll do SciComm or something else, or policy, or work for the Heart and Stroke Foundation, working for them and helping to fund research, So there's lots of opportunities out there to stay in the research business without having, a lab and test tubes and the other stuff that, normally think of.
Yeah. I think you're making a lot of good points about values and what your value is in determining what your career, your future career should be.
Yeah.
And I guess related to that too, you mentioned that the 10,000 PhDs tracked PhD students, I think from 2016. I'm not sure when it ended, but do you foresee University of Toronto and other universities potentially continuing to track PhD students? And do you think supervisors should be trying to do something similar for their own labs?
Yeah, so we tracked from we did the project in 2016, we tracked it from 2015. And Maria, you brought up a good point. SGS is right now doing an update, going from 2016 to 2022 for masters, PhDs, and for postdocs actually as well. And other universities have done similar things. UBC was doing a similar project at the same time. They used a little different methodology. They contacted people, and then they ended up doing the internet searches after. University of Alberta's done it, Concordia's done it. And then actually it was the 10,000 PhD got a bit of press in the United States too, and as listed as a best practice. And a lot of universities in the States, especially the publicly funded ones, are doing similar projects looking at their graduates as well. So I'm really pleased that it had an impact that it did. You could talk about impact in publications and stuff, but to me the biggest impact is on students like you, Maria. Say, well, I had a look at this and it got me thinking about my career path, right? That's the main thing, and what those options are. The thing I heard from Jonathan Turner, I think it was a long time ago, when he was doing some work at the Career Center. So that's again a place where graduate students can go, is the Career Center for advice. Stay open is the real, the best advice. Don't think about, oh, here's what I want to be, and I'm working my way towards that one and only goal, say being a professor, when there's so many other things you can do. So staying open is a piece of advice that I got. And I said, yeah, that's good advice. And do that. Become they call it career exploration now. In fact, they've changed it, right? It's not career advising, it's exploration. So let's explore. Let's find out what's out there. How do you know if you haven't looked around? So be an explorer is one advice.
Right.
For sure.
I think that's the perfect word, exploration. And I think that's the different resources you were mentioning, as well as the 10,000 PhD project, all have in common this idea of exploration and exposure. Like, it really helps give people exposure. And I think often if you don't know what's available, you might go on that one track that where you think academia leads to, sorry, PhD leads to academia, and that's what you're supposed to do. And that seems to be what at least universities and departments built their previous programs on. And it might not be the best for student development, like moving forward, considering there are these different careers they can take. Speaking of careers, I know for a career, because there's such a diverse variety of careers that PhDs can take, professional development is really important. And for that reason, I was wondering what professional development means to you.
Professional development used to be thought of as extracurricular. You can go to a workshop, you might go to, a meeting or something, if you had time, right? Just you do it. Then there's some co-curricular stuff that SGS was offering. That's great. So you get a notation on your transcript. You took a number of these courses, I think it was 60 hours worth. You get a notation, say you've done some professional development, which is good. So it shows up in your resume as well, which is good when you look for a job, right? And then but Nan and I thought this was so important. It should be curricular, should be for credit. And it should be built into almost everything we do. Every course should be about building skills, right? And we talk about those skills in graduate school about, problem solving skills, because, it's called research, read, look again, research, look again, keep looking. So we're great problem solvers, right? That's one skill we have. The number one skill that we identified as being crucial is communication. Whether you're, staying in academia, where you want to communicate your science to, your department, to your colleagues, you publish a paper, you go to seminars, or to communicate, I think really importantly, to the public. Can you communicate your exciting science to the public? Those are communicate. And in business, the same thing. You'll be able to communicate, really effectively. So build those communication skills. Being able to talk, at a proper level to a non-expert. And quite frankly, Maria, everybody, even your lab, is not an expert in what you're doing. Research is so specialized that you're doing your little, nice, cool project. You're diving deep into it, and people sitting around, your lab meeting may or may not know, like, what the heck is that all about? So even there, you have to communicate. And there's, certain things that we teach, students in our courses. And one of them, came from a woman called Judith Humphreys. I've done a lot of reading on, professional development, communication, etc. Judith Humphreys, a Canadian, she does, communication kind of courses that business people take. Really exciting kind of stuff. She wrote a book, and you can get it, about communication. But basically, one thing I took away from her book was, the concept of a, grabber statement, something that's a grabber. So what's a grabber statement? I said, what is that? And it's a grabber statement is that, I had an interview today.
Okay.
That absolutely changed my life. Okay. So you say that to somebody, they're going to say, wow. Okay. So a grabber statement says, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Tell me more.
I see.
So even in your seminars, we all have a very formatted version, a title that is indecipherable except to the expert, especially if you're in immunology. I hate to pick on my immunology friends. Interleukin 12. I know what it is, but I don't know what 12 is. How's it? It's this fancy title. It's often the title of a paper, which is a bad idea, right? So nobody knows what you're talking about in the first place. So the title is indecipherable. Then you have to do an introduction about 2 or 3 minutes to bring people up to speed in a very complex field. Impossible, right? You cannot do it. You cannot do it. Then you're going to talk about methods which may be common or not. And if they're common, you don't have to talk about them. And if they're uncommon, you have no time to talk about them. So you forget about methods, right? What people want to know is what you found out. Mm-hmm. So you start off saying, you can give you a little bit of, who you are, but then say, during the course of my investigations, I discovered a new method of using baker's yeast to discover novel anti-cancer drugs. Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Tell me more. How do you use yeast to discover cancer drugs? And away you go. And you tell that stuff. So that's the communication part. And communicating to diverse audiences. And that's same as you want to be a lecturer or a teacher stuff, you have to engage people and get them interested in your stuff and grab them somehow to get their attention.
I agree. And I think, like, you mentioned a lot of academic careers, but I think for a lot of non-academic careers, like you kind of touched on with Nana in in startups or within consulting, your ability to communicate with clients, especially, and demonstrate what you're offering and the impact you can make with them is super important. So like the structure you're talking about, learning that structure, learning to just be very, I guess, give an overarching statement is really helpful.
Yeah, in biotech, I mean, it's the 3-minute pitch idea, and you guys, your life sciences inside is involved in those kind of competitions. They're really great. 3-minute thesis, same thing. How do you summarize 6 years of work in 3 minutes with one slide? You say it's impossible. No, you can do it. And that's the same thing. We, in our classes, we have the students, create a company and make up something of interest, right? It doesn't have to be in their area, just make something up, work with somebody else. So it's teamwork, right? And come up with an idea, and we're going to pitch it to, a group of 3 people. We usually bring in like some kind of communication person. It might be a reporter from the Globe and Mail, science reporter. We've done that. Somebody, an angel investor who has money, and then a patent lawyer, right? The 3 of them. And then, you don't give your research seminar with the stupid title that nobody understands. You give them the grabber, right? And you go, oh, wow, that's interesting. Tell me more, right? And the same as in job interviews, right? When people are interviewing for jobs, people say, oh, do you want to talk about my thesis? No, they don't. I understand. They know you did a PhD. So a PhD means you know how to work hard. You're a problem solver. You can write. You can communicate. You can take massive amounts of material. That's your bibliography. Typically 300 references. You read them all. Supposedly, better have. If I'm on your exam, I'll ask you about a citation and say, well, tell me about this paper because it's in your thesis, right? So you must have read it. Yeah. So take 300 papers, make sense of it, come up with an idea, hypothesis, test it, figure out a way, and move forward. Right? That's amazing. It's that's what companies look for. So a lot of our students work for consulting companies, right? Taking in massive amounts of information, whether it's marketplace, market share, all this kind of stuff, and then whittling it down to the essentials and coming up with some kind of idea, hypothesis. You're really well trained to do that kind of work. So working on your communication skills, I think, is something that you can do almost all the time. Don't be afraid, again, to talk to your parents or, your favorite aunt or somebody, uncle, whatever, about what you're doing, right?
Yeah, so we've really touched on how communication is a soft skill that's really essential, and you can learn it in grad school and other places. Yeah. I was wondering if there's other soft skills you think of as essential that you could learn in 100%. Grad school as well.
100%. So when I talk to my, colleagues in biotech and pharma, what they're looking for is people who can become effective members of a team, right? So can you work as a team? So I encourage students to collaborate in their own lab or bring, suggested collaboration up, with their supervisor. Or I read this really cool paper by so-and-so at this place. I think you could try to do something together. You come up with the idea and push it forward. So being an effective member of a team, and that gets back to communications. If you're part of a team, can you communicate what you're doing to other team members? If you're the leader, really important. I mean, you read a lot of books about leadership, and they always talk about communication being sort of the number one thing. Another way to kind of look at it, we do this in our courses, you mentioned it earlier, Maria, is, you think about the values you have. And I think, even me during the pandemic, it's time to kind of step back and do some kind of self-assessment about where I am and where I'm going and what I want to do and want to be and be a better person, whatever, all this stuff, right? So you think about the values that you have, the underlying values that you have in your life that, came from, usually, family, friends, religion, whatever, all interactions, right? Those the values you hold dear. I mean, you ask people, we do this in the course, we have these value cards. You can Google that. There's a whole pile of these cards, and you can play with them and ask students to, pick their top 3 values that they have. Well, everybody says family and health. Okay, yeah, okay, we got that. Yeah, of course. You want to, health, everyone wants to be healthy, and family is important to most people, right? Away you go. But what are values? So like I value knowledge, right? Okay, that's one of my values. Knowledge is one. And because of that, I became a scientist, right? Because it fits with my value of knowledge, right? And away you go. So values leads into interests. So interest in science, because my value is knowledge, right? That's it. Then in order to follow that interest, you have to develop skills, right? So you start with values, think about those. Then you go into your interests. What are they? And then do you have the skills, to follow those interests? So your interest might be, musical, for example. Like I love music and I have interest in music, but I have no skills, and I've tried and I cannot. So I've given up on that. And the fourth element, and you can look at this, in the like on the website, all these values, interests, and skills. The fourth part that's really important is personality too, your own, getting to know yourself. Because there are people who like to work on their own. They're quite happy to sit, with a laptop or in a cubicle and work away. Others got to interact with other people, right? I love to interact with other people. So if you want to interact with other people, maybe you should become a medical science liaison, which is, somebody who works for the pharmaceutical companies and becomes an expert in a certain drug or, treatment or whatever, and goes out there and promotes it. And they're experts they have the knowledge base, to talk about it, that. But interacting with different, giving talks and meeting people and doing that. Is that your personality or not? If it's not, and you can work on your personality. I always consider myself an introvert, right? Because no, you're not.
No, I definitely am an introvert.
No, I'm an introvert. I am, and to get up in front of a class of 1,200 kids, and took me, a lot of courage actually to do it, and I was well prepared, and I want to make sure I engaged the students, and I did a good job there. But it took a lot of work to develop that skill, because I did have an interest in knowledge. So I also was teaching and disseminating knowledge, and then how can I develop my skills. And when I started out, as mentioned, in the University of Alberta, I was my lecturing was terrible. I got really bad reviews, and I went to a senior professor who I went to his lecture and I thought they were brilliant, and he said, "Could you sit in my lectures?" And then he did, and then right after lectures, come to my office. He says, I have to talk to you about this. So I think students should think about the same thing. What are the opportunities that U of T is giving me with all these, people, around, facilities, everything, so take advantage of those opportunities. I guess that's sort of the last maybe piece of advice I give to people is, get out of your lab, right? So people who work, research is tough and you have to spend a lot of time doing it. I get it, right? When I did it, everybody works all kinds of hours. And sometimes you have to work weekends. I get it. It's the way it is. Other people join a sports club. You never know. We had one person who he joined, I think it was Taekwondo or something like that. He was doing it as undergrad and grad school. I'm too busy to do that, but he loved it, right? So he's, oh, no, I'll do it again. And then they were looking for, I think it was a treasurer or something like that. And he said, well, I guess I'll volunteer. I don't know anything about being a treasurer. So he took a course, like, night school or something about how to keep, and did a great job. And then I think one of the health charities was looking for somebody to do to work on their finances, right? And he applied for the job, although he wasn't like a CPA or chartered accountant or anything, but he was a PhD scientist working for health, so he got the job.
Wow.
And the reason he got the job is he developed those financial skills volunteering for like a sports club at U of T. So there you go. That's a true story. So yeah.
Really impressive. I think what you've touched on too is like a lot of the different resources available at U of T. So like classes, the GPD class that you run that you mentioned, and opportunities, which I guess it seems like you're suggesting it's a really good idea to focus on, or not focus, just follow the path you were kind of mentioning, values, which affect interests, which affect what soft skills you're interested in, and then who you are as a person, and like the soft skills and who you are as a person kind of feed back into interests and how interested you are in that, to really figure it out yourself and figure out, do I want these soft skills, and how much should I work on them, because how interested am I in this? And it sounded like he was really into the treasurer work, and he was able to leverage that then to get a job as a CPA.
No, he worked for a health charity actually as their financial officer, right? So even though, so he was qualified to do the work because he had some credentials. He got the credentials to do it, right? But not the highest level, just enough. But they loved him because he was a scientist, right? And these agencies are the ones that fund research. They put out calls for applications, so he could talk about what that looks like. He's written grant applications with his supervisor before. He knows all about those. What's that environment look like? So what would happen? And when those applications come in, he could look at those budgets very carefully, right? All those line items of personnel, whether resource animals, software, chemicals, all the stuff. He knew all those things. So he could do all that work, really, really well for the agency, right? So it was brilliant. Yeah.
I think that's a really good example too of how you can use your academic, like your experiences with your supervisor in academia to actually help. So if you have done any grant writing or preparing like the financial statements in grants, like you're helping your supervisor and you're gaining exposure, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's very easy to say, working on a project and it's funded by CIHR. Ask your supervisor for the grant application they submitted and got funded, and read it.
yeah.
I don't think hardly any students ever do that. That's right. That's easy. The supervisor, here it is. So have a good look at it. And then that shows that the student is really interested in the project. And you might read that and say, well, I think I'd rather work on that part of the project. Actually, that sounds way more interesting to me than the one you assigned me. And then you look at the budgets and all the other things. And then, of course, when the next application comes up when you're a senior student, you can help write that. I mean, you provide the data, but get more involved in writing that application. But just think of the opportunities and the value of the opportunity. It's not that you paid tuition so you take some courses and okay, I get that. But no, you've been, brought into an environment where there are so many opportunities, including volunteer ones, sports club, everything was there. Just get out and seize those opportunities and make the most of it. It will pay you back many-fold over in many ways, both just in fulfillment, by being able to do something, for others and good. And then, for yourself, like you said, that example, building a skill set that you didn't have, that you wanted to, I guess I can fill that in, and away you go. I should point out that the School of Continuing Studies has lots of courses that you can take as well.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's another place to go. So they have, like, you can take project management. That's what you're doing with your project. You're trying to manage it. You don't have any skills really to do that, but they have project management courses, and you can get a certificate in project management. Actually, they do a number of these courses. And I think as grad students, you get a credit to take a number of these courses for free. So you should look into School of Continuing Studies as well.
That's very good to know. I think certificates are also something that's not really discussed in grad school, but very helpful if you're interested in going into industry. So yeah, those are a great list of courses. So the School of Continuing Studies, the GPD courses, and also just in terms of opportunities, try and do what you're interested in and see what soft skills it helps you develop. And if you're developing the right soft skills through those opportunities, I think those were all great suggestions.
Great summary. Great summary.
Thank you. And also a summary of like the soft skills you mentioned. I think problem solving, communication, and teamwork is the ones, at least in grad school, that you can find, and look for other opportunities to develop more soft skills as well.
Right. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for sharing all that insight, and especially like how also emphasizing how important it is to explore with the 10,000 PhDs project and really see what, I guess, potential exists apart from just a very linear path from like your PhD to academia. I think right now I'd like to open the conversation up to another student. I'd like to introduce everyone to Ala. Thank you, Ala, for being here. Ala is a sixth year PhD student and the current president of LSCDS. Hi, Ala.
Hi, Maria, and hi, Reinhardt.
Hey, Ala, good to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.
So Ala, I know you're involved in a lot of different activities, and I guess you've taken a lot of opportunities. I was wondering why you decided to take on these different opportunities and what you really gained from it in terms of professional development.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say when I started my PhD, I thought it was going to be a linear path where I'm coming in because prior to doing my PhD, I was working in the government. So for me, a PhD was, I'm here to learn more skills, more knowledge, and then I'm going to come back to the government, and like that would be the end of the story. But being in grad school and like meeting different friends and just seeing how the world is working around you actually kind of opened my eyes to think about what other paths I could take. So it's not just the government. So I kind of wanted to see what's out there for like further develop my communication skills, my networking skills, and just being able to go outside the lab and see what's out there. And I found that all my experiences were very fruitful. Not one of them kind of was the end all be all. And I truly valued all of them. They were extremely meaningful.
It's great to know how, I guess, you've been able to see how it really affects not only soft skill development, but also culture building and community building, and how that was really important to you. And I think that's something that when you're in grad school, I think Dr. Reitmeyer, you also mentioned this, like get out of the lab. Students are so focused on their research project, because oftentimes I think what happens is you come right out of undergrad and you go to grad school and it's just the same mindset. So I think it probably really helped having like some work experience and understanding that your research is really important and you are making a difference, but you also should try and work, like get out, work with other people, explore different passions and interests.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So I also know you've worked with different graduate professional development initiatives, and I was wondering if you could comment on any of those and any resources you thought were really helpful to you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm extremely biased, but I would say the Life Sciences Career Development Syndicate is probably one of the best student groups that I've been a part of. Not only because the group itself is just fantastic and everybody is so hardworking and we all kind of have the same vision and mission in mind, but also even the programming that we offer. We take you basically throughout like the different career stage phases. So if you're just want to know what's out there, you can attend our seminars. If you want to have a mentor, if you want to apply your skills, we have a program for everybody out there. And I find that extremely valuable for someone in grad school who, like you said, is so focused on the research that when you want to actually learn what's out there, it's nice to kind of handhold and be like, here is what you have. I've also been a part of other student groups. So there is UCG, which is University Consulting Group, the GMCA, the Graduate Management Consulting Association, and these two are really helpful. So the former was to apply the skills that you would have learned and gained from the latter, which was really exciting. And I wanted to comment on something that Reinhardt was saying, take advantage of the opportunities presented at U of T. So there are a lot of grants that the university actually gives you if you have an idea, if you want to develop something. And this is something that I would say a year ago, a couple of students and I kind of came up with the mental health conference that was international, and it spanned for 24 hours. By the end of that conference, I just wanted to sleep. But the university funded that entirely, which was really helpful for us because it allowed us to imagine something and actually put it to life. So yeah, and then there's all the other resources that Reinhardt mentioned. I find them all to be extremely useful.
Thank you. I think it was a really great mentioning to the different grants that U of T offers, which really helps you kind of follow your interests again and develop soft skills on your own terms a little bit, I think. And so I have one last question for you both, and thank you for your time. But I was wondering if you could give any piece of advice to your younger self when you started grad school, what would it be?
Okay, do you want me to go first? Or Ala, you want to go first?
I can start actually. Something that I actively need to always remind myself is don't be paralyzed by the sheer amount of career paths that you can see. I'm basically finishing up my PhD now, and this is still something that is of concern to me because you develop so many skills, you do so many things throughout your graduate school that by the end you're like, oh my God, I could be good at anything. So it's okay. Like, it's okay if you don't know what's going on and you don't know what you want to go into next. I think for the most part, try to gain as much knowledge and as many experiences as you can during grad school, because then that opens the doors for you. And then once you actually sit down, you can say, okay, I'm good at everything, but here's the things I actually would enjoy doing.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so my pathway was very old school and linear. And again, kind of at every step along the way, I had people who gave me really good advice. I kind of didn't even know it at the time that when I look back now, and I've, even given talks and written little articles about it. If you want to Google me and Red Squirrel, talks about my pathway. So they were mentors to me, and they were people who cared about me and my career. I didn't really recognize that at the time. And I guess if I had to go back, I would show more gratitude to those people. Some of them are, passed away sadly, but, even my grade 13 at the time, biology teacher, Mr. Gibson, had a profound effect on my life. And I never really got the chance to show, gratitude to those people. And I try to do that now. So that's something, if I were going back, I'd definitely go back to my high school and say, Mr. Gibson, that project that I did on red squirrels and black squirrels, that set me on a research pathway. And, I've been very happy with that. So because of you, that got me started in research, So gratitude, that's the one thing I would.
I want to take yours now. I drop.
That sounded so meaningful. It made me reflect on my life and who I thought contributed. That's really important. And I think when you're in your early stages of the career, that's something you don't think about. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. So I'd like to thank you both for being here and sharing your thoughts on professional development. I think trainees will benefit from learning about the variety of options available. And for our listeners, stay tuned for our next episode as we delve further into topics about professional development and growth and cover topics such as mentorship, which is very important. So, thank you.
Great. Again, showing gratitude. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye for now.